He walked into a dusty diner for coffee and found the friend who once saved his future wiping tables for tips. The smell of frying bacon and fresh coffee wasn't what Matthew Branson had planned for his Tuesday morning. He was supposed to be halfway to a meeting in downtown Phoenix reviewing property reports in the back of his town car. Instead, a flat tire on the highway left him stranded outside Yuma, Arizona, with nothing but a roadside diner called Patty's Place in sight. He pushed open the glass door, the bell above it giving a tired jingle. The place looked frozen in time. Vinyl booths patched with duct tape, faded photos of local softball teams on the walls, a jukebox that probably hadn't played a song in years. Matthew adjusted his jacket, feeling out of place in his tailored suit among truckers and farmers wearing ball caps. He slid into a corner booth, ordered black coffee, and was pulling out his phone when a voice said, "In nothing in the not sending." "Morning. Can I get you started with some breakfast?" He looked up and for a second his mind went completely blank. Standing there with a pen and pad in hand was Renee Parker. Not a Renee Parker, the Renee Parker, his best friend from middle school. The girl who used to quiz him on fractions while they sat on the stoop of her apartment building. The one who taught him to ignore the kids who made fun of his thrift store sneakers. The one who had bigger dreams than anyone he'd ever met. But here she was, wearing a faded apron, hair pulled back in a loose bun, eyes a little more tired than he remembered. She didn't recognize him. Not yet. She was too busy wiping her hands on a dish towel, the corner of her mouth twitching like she was trying to smile through exhaustion. Matthew's throat tightened. He hadn't seen her in over 20 years. Back then, they'd both sworn they'd leave their struggling neighborhood and never look back. He'd kept that promise, and then some. His real estate empire stretched across 5 states. His face had been in magazines. Renee, he couldn't help but notice the tremor in her hands when she wrote his order down. The way her shoulders drooped between tables. He didn't want to stare, but he couldn't stop. She glanced up finally, her gaze locking with his. "Wait, Matt?" she said, slowly, tilting her head. "Matthew Branson?" Her voice still had that same warmth, like the years hadn't stolen it, but the look in her eyes, that was different. "Hey, Renee," he said, standing up slightly. "It's been a long time." She let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "I'll say, what are you doing in a place like this?" He could have answered honestly. Flat tire, bad luck, wrong exit. But something about her tone made him choose his words carefully, just passing through. But the truth was, he wasn't sure if this was a coincidence or something he was meant to see. But before he could figure that out, she glanced over her shoulder toward the kitchen like someone was calling her. And whatever conversation they were about to have had to wait. Renee scribbled something on her order pad before hurrying toward the kitchen window. The cook, a heavy-set man with a sweat-stained bandana, barked something Matthew couldn't hear over the clatter of dishes. She took 2 steaming plates, balanced them on one arm, and moved toward another table with the kind of practiced rhythm that only comes from years of doing the same thing. Matthew sat back, fingers drumming against the coffee mug in front of him. He wasn't used to waiting for people to come back. In his world, people made time for him, but here he was, just another customer in line. Finally, after dropping off food and topping off someone's iced tea, she made her way back. "Okay," she said, sliding into the booth across from him for just a second. "I know it's been forever, but it's definitely you." She laughed lightly. "You even got the same serious face." He smirked. "Guess I never grew out of it." Renee's eyes flicked over his suit, the watch on his wrist, and the way his shoes looked like they'd never touched dirt. "You look different, though, in a good way. So, where'd life take you?" Matthew hesitated. "Intersording in sons." He knew what saying billionaire real estate investor could do in a small town diner. Conversations changed, faces tightened. People assumed you thought you were better than them. And with Renee, the last thing he wanted was for her to feel that wall between them. "I've been in real estate," he said simply. "Keeps me busy." She raised an eyebrow. "Real estate? Like selling houses?" "Something like that." He took a sip of his coffee to dodge the question. Her smile was polite, but there was something in her eyes. Curiosity, maybe even suspicion. Still, she didn't push. "So you passing through, Yuma, or what?" she asked, glancing over her shoulder again when a bell dinged from the kitchen. "Yeah, just a pit stop." "That's rare," she said, standing up again. "Most people who stop here are regulars, truckers, or lost." He chuckled. "Guess I'm in the last category then." She grabbed his menu. "I'll put your order in. Don't go disappearing on me." Matthew watched her weave through the tables again, greeting customers by name, smiling even when the smiles weren't returned. He remembered how they used to talk about opening a bookstore together one day, the kind with beanbag chairs and walls covered in art from local kids. Seeing her here, carrying plates instead of books, made his stomach twist. But what unsettled him more was how easily she seemed to hide whatever was going on behind that smile, and he was starting to realize he wanted to know why. Renee came back a few minutes later, setting a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of him. "On the house," she said with a little shrug. "You don't have to do that," Matthew replied. "I want to," she said, sliding into the booth across from him again. "It's not every day an old friend walks in here." He studied her face while she poured him more coffee. There were faint lines near her eyes now, the kind you get from both laughter and worry. Her hands were rougher than he remembered, and a small scar ran across the top of her knuckle. So she began stirring a packet of sugar into her own mug. "Ningnasdame sapin tatenanonse." What's real estate like? You flipping houses or something bigger? Soundastin in downtown and net. "Bigger," he said cautiously. "And apartments, commercial properties, that sort of thing." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "That sounds intense." "It has its moments." She nodded slowly. "Good for you. You always did work hard. Remember how you used to help me with history even though you hated it?" He chuckled. "Still do. I only helped because you threatened to stop helping me with math." Her laugh was real this time, not the polite kind. "True." She sipped her coffee, then looked down at the table like she was deciding whether to say something. "It's weird seeing you here. Makes me think about all the stuff we used to talk about." "Like the bookstore?" he asked. "Yeah." She smiled faintly. Guess life had other plans. Matthew wanted to ask what those plans were, but he could feel the weight behind her words. It wasn't the kind of thing you push for in a diner full of people who might overhear. "How long have you been here?" he asked instead. She shrugged. While work steady, pays the bills, Sue, takin in a tree now." The way she said it, flat with no conviction, told him more than any long explanation could. A group of noisy customers walked in and Renee glanced toward them, her smile snapping back into place like a mask she'd worn 1,000 times. "Duty calls," she said, sliding out of the booth. As she walked away, Matthew picked at his toast, his mind spinning. This was Renee, the girl who once told him she was going to own a business, travel the world, and never settle for less. But here she was, settling for less every single day. And he couldn't stop wondering what had happened to her dreams. Matthew stayed in that booth longer than he meant to. He watched Renee work the room like she'd been doing it forever, balancing plates, dodging a kid running between tables, laughing at an old man's joke she probably heard 100 times before. But there were cracks in the act. When she thought no one was looking, her smile faded. She'd pause to rub her wrist like it hurt. She'd stare out the front window for just a moment too long before forcing herself back into motion. When the crowd thinned, she came back over, leaning against the booth's edge. "You still in touch with anyone from back home?" she asked. "Not really," he said. "Life got busy?" "Yeah, same here." Her gaze dropped to the floor for a second, except busy looks a little different for me. He didn't miss the edge in her voice. You want to talk about it?" She hesitated, then shook her head. Not here. Not with Earl listening. So, Nadia Ning D. Creeds." She tilted her chin toward the cook in the back who was clearly trying to look busy while leaning half out the kitchen window to eavesdrop. Matthew grinned slightly. "You free after your shift?" Her eyes darted toward the clock. If I can get someone to cover the last hour, maybe. But she trailed off, biting her lip. Why? What's this about? Just catching up, he said. But he knew that wasn't the whole truth. He wanted to know why she was here, what had happened between their teenage dreams and this diner. Before she could respond, a man in a stained trucker cap waved his empty coffee mug in the air. Renee, refill, she sighed. Story of my life. As she walked away, Matthew noticed the limp in her step. But there. Something told him her life had been harder than she was letting on. But he had no idea just how deep that hardship went until she sat across from him later and told him everything. The diner was nearly empty by the time Renee slid into the booth across from Matthew again, this time without her apron. Her hair was down now, framing her face, and she looked a little less like the waitress everyone ordered around and a little more like the girl he remembered. I've got 30 minutes before my relief shows up, she said. You wanted to talk, so talk. Matthew leaned forward. So, tintiler sta de na tintian. I wanted to see how you've been. Really been? She gave a small, humorless laugh. You sure you want the honest version? That's the only one I'm interested in. For a moment, she just stared at him like she was debating whether he could handle it. Then she took a deep breath. All right, after high school, I got a scholarship to Arizona State. Thought it was my ticket out. But halfway through, my mom got sick. I dropped out to take care of her. Money got tight. Bills piled up. After she passed, I never went back. Matthew didn't interrupt. Nati imedigerdersant. I married a guy who seemed stable. Thought he'd help me get back on track. Turns out he liked the idea of a wife who didn't ask questions about where the money was going. When I finally did, it turned out where was a blackjack table in Laughlin and money was everything we had. She looked down at her hands. He left 2 years ago. Haven't heard from him since. Matthew's chest tightened. And you've been here ever since? Yeah. Tried other jobs, but this is steady. Not much else in town unless you've got a degree. Which I don't. She gave a little shrug, like that explained everything. Renee, he started, but she held up a hand. Don't. I'm not telling you this for pity. It's just life. Some people win big. Some people end up here. He shook his head. That's not how I see it. You didn't lose. You got knocked down. That's different. She smirked faintly. Easy for you to say when you're sitting there in a suit that probably costs more than my car. He leaned back, studying her. Maybe, but that doesn't mean I don't remember where I came from or the people who helped me get here. Her eyes softened just a little. So, what are you saying? Matthew didn't answer right away because the truth was the idea forming in his head was bigger than just buying her dinner or slipping her some cash. But he knew that if he said it out loud, it might change both their lives forever. Matthew waited until her shift ended. They walked out together into the fading desert light, the diner's neon sign buzzing behind them. Her car, an old sun-faded sedan, was parked crooked along the curb. She tossed her apron onto the back seat and leaned against the door. So, she said, you going to tell me what's on your mind, or are we just going to stand here staring at each other? Nou tat er niet kan ser zijn. He slipped his hands into his pockets. What if I told you I could help you get out of here? Her brow furrowed. Out of Yuma? Out of this? The diner, the dead-end jobs, the routine that's been holding you down? She crossed her arms. And what? You just swoop in and fix everything? That's not how life works, Matt. Sometimes it is, he said quietly, if someone cares enough to make it happen. Her expression tightened. I don't want charity. This isn't charity, he replied. Das Zinsin. This is me paying back someone who believed in me before anyone else did. You're the reason I passed math. You're the reason I didn't quit school. You don't even realize how much that mattered. She looked away, blinking fast. Even if I said yes, what exactly are you offering? A job? Not just a job, a future. I own properties in Phoenix. One of them needs a manager. Office work, good salary, benefits. I'd cover the training. Her head snapped back toward him. You're serious? Dead serious and unsure de sana and You've got the brains for it, and I know you'd be good at it. Renee laughed under her breath, shaking her head like she couldn't decide if he was crazy or genuine. That's a lot to take in. Think about it, he said. You don't have to decide right now, but I'm not offering because I feel sorry for you. I'm offering because I know you're capable of more than this place is ever going to give you. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared past him, watching a truck rumble down the highway. You make it sound so simple. Sometimes it is, he said. For a long moment, the only sound was the diner sign buzzing and the low hum of passing cars. Finally, she looked at him again. I'll think about it. But Matthew could tell by the way she said it that something inside her had already shifted. Like for the first time in years, she could actually picture a way forward. The next morning, Matthew was halfway through his coffee at the motel when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hello, it's me. Renee's voice came through a little shaky. I thought about it. He set his mug down. And I'm scared, she admitted. It's been so long since I've done anything big, but if the offer is still there, I want to try. A slow smile spread across his face. It's still there. I'll have my assistant send you the details. We'll get you started next month. Silence for a beat. Then she said softly, thank you for seeing me as more than this job. For remembering who I used to be. You never stopped being her, Renee. He said, you just forgot for a while. When he hung up, he felt something he hadn't in years. That same spark he'd had as a teenager when they used to sit on the stoop dreaming about what was possible. 3 months later, Matthew stopped by the Phoenix office to check in. Renee was behind the desk, a headset on, typing confidently into a computer. She looked up and grinned. Not the tired practice grin from the diner, but a real one, the kind that reaches the eyes. Boss man, she teased. You're going to ruin my productivity. He laughed, just making sure you're still here. Where else would I be? She said, and he could tell she meant it. As he left the building, Matthew thought about how simple it had been. One conversation, one chance, and everything was different. Sometimes helping someone doesn't mean handing them the world. It means showing them the door and reminding them they can walk through it. And if you're listening to this, maybe there's someone in your life who's forgotten their own potential. Don't just tell them they can make it. Show them how. You never know how much that moment might mean. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs a little push toward their own second.